Welcome to Ask An Arachnologist with Rebecca Ray. It's a beautiful Saturday, and typically this time of year, we would be out on Antelope Island with a booth. My name is Ellen Erickson, and I'm the Citizen Science Coordinator with the Natural History Museum of Utah. And for several years, the Natural History Museum has had a representation out at Antelope Island Spiderfest event, and we're there doing fun art projects and talking to people about spiders. And last year, for the first time, Rebecca Ray, who is aware of many hats, one of which is a citizen science volunteer with the Natural History Museum of Utah, and another is an arachnologist, self-trained and wonderful citizen scientist. And she last year, for the first time, had an Ask an Arachnologist table at the festival. It was well received by people coming through. It was a really warm but beautiful day, and there were lots of cool spiders to find. And Rebecca was there answering questions and talking to people about spiders and basically just sort of sharing the spider love. Since we can't be out on Antelope Island all together in person today, I still wanted to share Rebecca with you all and her wonderful knowledge and passion about spiders. And so here we are on Zoom, the new way of communicating these days. So we're thrilled to have you all join. As I've mentioned, we've got, we're all here online, and so you're welcome to put your camera up if you'd like. You also don't need to. We've got a chat window rolling, so if you've got questions and want to ask Rebecca questions in the chat window at any point, feel free to type them in, and I'll get to them at some point during our time here together. And then when we have more conversational times, you're also welcome to unmute your mic and ask a question or share a story or anything you'd like with your voice is totally wonderful and welcome as well. So please feel free to think of this as a conversational spider hour together here on Zoom. So I mentioned Rebecca's background a little bit in her naturalist background. I suppose you are an amateur naturalist, self-taught, who has a large presence on iNaturalist. She's a curator on the platform, which means she is proven her worth and knowledge specifically around spiders. And she's an amazing and wonderful resource and a wonderful person all around. And so Rebecca, I'm so thrilled to have you here with us today. I'll let you fill in any other introduction points you'd like to and then get rolling with the beginning of your time.
Thank you very much, Ellen. And I'm honored to have the chance to do this again, even though it looks a little bit different this year. After trying it out at a table last year, at the end of it, I was like, hey, next year I have so many ideas. I must do this again. It was great. So I'm going to just spend a few minutes telling you a little bit about my background and how I got into arachnology, and then I had some submitted questions that I wanted to answer, and then we'll open it up to some discussion because I would like to spider nerd out with you guys. So let me share my screen with you. This is the way to go. Whoop, no. And apologize, this is the first time that I have done this via Zoom. Okay, so you guys can't see my notes, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure. It just seems impossible. Oh, technology. It's like magic. Okay, so I am Rebecca Ray. I included this picture to show kind of, this is an old one from college, but for many, many years, this is how my family and friends have known me, that I generally am crouching on the ground. Anywhere you go with me, I will be looking at bushes and the trail, and I'm sorry if you ever walk with me. Actually, you guys will probably like it if you're here. We won't go far because we will be exploring the things around us for the tinies and the little moving creatures. But yes, I volunteer with the museum. I found out about when they started bio blitzes through Christy Bill's Salt Lake Bug Lovers page, and that is also how I was introduced to iNaturalist, and that started me on my much larger journey of arachnology. So that was sort of the intro to the large universe that I'm so glad to be a part of now. So arachnology. Arachnology is the scientific study of arachnids. So that's spiders and their relatives. And arachnology means studying their behavior, their anatomy, taxonomy. So that's how they're organized into families and genera and species and subspecies. It's their habitat and the distribution within the world and so much more. So arachnology is really a lot of things. It encompasses a lot. So I don't actually work in a field that's related to arachnology. I don't have any formal education in arachnology, which is actually really hard to come by. There are very, very few places that you can get like a degree in arachnology. There are not a lot of ways to study arachnology itself, but I also didn't study entomology or anything like that. So the experience and knowledge that I have acquired has been through self-study and collaboration with researchers and other arachnologists and entomologists and many enthusiasts. This is much easier nowadays with the internet. So social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook and iNaturalist. And it's really neat to be able to connect with people around the world. And it's amazing how open people are to connecting. But I don't have the same caliber of background that some people with formal education and like lab work do, but I have worked very hard for a number of years now to acquire the knowledge that I have, and I'm still learning all the time. But arachnologists come from all different backgrounds, especially because there isn't a formal route to follow. So some have education in arachnology in those few places that you can get that, or a related field. So like entomology or biology, zoology. Some are people doing research, some are working in fields that involve spiders, some got into it as volunteers. They maybe just went to volunteer with some particular project at a museum and then ended up getting a mentor and then went, became really passionate about it and ended up over the years becoming an arachnologist. And then others became arachnologists through hard work because they loved spiders so much they just couldn't help themselves. There are many people who are just really passionate about arachnids and spiders, but it's amazing how few arachnologists there really are in the world. It's a very, very small community. We recently had a virtual symposium for the first time for the American Arachnological Society, and it was a absolute record-breaking year because it was virtual. They had some 300 something attendees. It was like never before. They said an entomological conference, you'll see, something like 9,000 attendees. So it's a very small community. And if you get into that, you will get to know the arachnologists very well. So I was actually raised to fear spiders. I was an arachnophobe all growing up. My mom was fearless. She didn't fear the spiders, didn't fear any of the stinging insects, nothing. My father was the one who was terrified of spiders, and he passed that on to us kids. Fear of spiders is not something we're born with. It's something that we're taught by those around us. We're taught it by society. We're taught it especially by our parents. So yes, my father definitely imprinted that on us. All of us kids were afraid of spiders growing up. I believed that the spiders were biting me, and in my sleep especially, and I had nightmares about them all the time. My sisters say the same things. They had nightmares. They still did even recently. And I'm happy to say that all of my siblings now are pretty good with spiders. They're all fans of them, and they advocate for spiders and teach other people about what great parts of our ecology and our environment they are. So we're all spider fans now. So it wasn't until I had an interaction with an orb weaver when I was in high school that things started to turn around. So there was a cat-faced spider, Aranius demoides, that had built a beautiful orb web on my porch in high school. And I had always loved the natural world and animals, and I thought this was a beautiful web. And I wanted to see if I could trick this spider. So I tossed a peanut shell that I found on the ground in its web, and I tried to trick it into thinking it was a fly. So I took a stick and I shook that peanut shell, and sure enough, it came running over, and I thought, ha ha, I've tricked you, you're so dumb. And it grabbed the peanut shell and threw it out of its web and shook the web at me. And I was absolutely floored. I thought, this spider is so much smarter than I thought it was, and it's an incredible thing that I want to watch. And in fact, I want to now feed it a live thing. I found a live fly and caught it and threw it in the web, and it came over and wrapped it up and ate the fly. And so I watched this spider for the next few days. There was a storm that came and blew down its web for the next few days, and it rebuilt each day. And finally it didn't rebuild, and I was heartbroken when I lost my friend. But I was so fascinated by this spider, it really started to change my perspective. And I thought, maybe spiders aren't the scary, horrible things that I thought they were. Maybe I need to pay attention a little bit more. Then a few years later, I was in college, and I went on a trip to North Carolina to a science and nature center, and they had a whole building that was dedicated to bugs, and a giant exhibit for Trichonephila clavipes. That is a giant, the golden orb weaver spider, and these are huge for anyone that's seen them in person. They are really a massive orb weaver, and some people call them banana spiders, but they can look pretty frightening. But these were in webs that were at least 6 feet tall, I'd say, and it was dozens of them, and these huge branches. And I was looking at this whole exhibit with them, and the more I looked at it, I was really entranced by the whole thing. But I finally realized I didn't see any glass, and I just kept looking around for a reflection on the glass, and I didn't see any. I finally blew to see if my breath would move the web, and it did. And I just couldn't, this didn't make any sense to me. How could there just be an open exhibit of giant spiders in this center with people? There were kids and people running around, and I mean, you could just reach out and grab the spider. How could this be possible? And someone who worked there walked by, and I said, excuse me, there's no glass here? They said, yeah, we don't need glass. Why? How can this be possible? And they said, as long as we keep them fed, they have no reason to leave. Orb weavers just stay in their webs as long as there's food. They would only leave to build webs someplace else to find where the food is. And that, again, blew my mind and gave me a completely different perspective on spiders that I thought would just wander around and find people and bite them or some sort of nefarious deeds. So yeah, after those two experiences, I knew I had to start thinking differently about spiders, and I wanted to watch and see what happened. So my paradigm had shifted, and I started watching spider behavior and learning more about them. And the greater the knowledge, the lesser the fear. So my fear just disappeared over the years, and it's still, I learn every day, and now it's almost completely gone. So I was already a huge enthusiast by the time I learned about iNaturalist 4 years ago, but this platform gave me a chance to share my passion through helping others identify the spiders they'd found. I found I had a lot to learn, but it helped me to get connected with the arachnologists and researchers and other enthusiasts all over the world. So this is what really helped spark my passion to study and work to build my knowledge of arachnids. And like I said, I'm still learning every day. And it just, the more I learn, the more it builds that enthusiasm. Right now I'm working on a checklist of Utah spiders, and discovering all the species that I didn't know we had just makes me want to get out and find them and discover, is this spider still here? You know, what else is out there? What has been introduced? What is maybe not there anymore? There's just so much to learn. So the questions that were submitted. First, what do you say to people who just think spiders are creepy and gross? What's the best argument to help people respect them? I love this question. So I think the way people see spiders is slower to change than their perception of them. So they'll probably still have that reaction of ew until they have some more positive personal interactions. So that's kind of something that we can't really change for them as much, but I believe we can help change their perception. So first of all, I don't argue with their point of view, right? Keep in mind that it can be very off-putting for someone if you try to tell them that their deeply held fear is wrong. So phobias aren't a choice. So we have to respect that. So I usually start by letting them know that spiders are hugely beneficial. That's something that I'm really excited about. And that, more often than not, that comes as a big surprise to people. So they've been taught that spiders are pests. That's just an idea that's out there. And when you let people know that they are a big, great part of the world, that right there sometimes starts to turn around their thinking. So teaching them that spiders are one of the best and integral methods of pest control and a crucial part of the food web is often helpful. Sometimes, let's see, I think I've got this on the next one. Yeah. Oh, I did put that on there, thanks. Sometimes I try to get a feel for why they find spiders to be problematic and address that. So some fears that people have, like, they're always chasing me. So telling them most spiders have no interest in you and would rather get away, but they might not know how in, say, the shower. They might need a little help. Okay, people are convinced that spiders are all powerful, but keep in mind that it's just a little tiny creature and you're the big creature, so they might need help from you. Maybe their fear is they keep coming in my house. So they see this as an intruder. Well, those are often mature males. They are wandering in search of a mate. I swear they're like biological imperative zombies who lose all sense of direction and sense at that point. So be a dear and send them back outside toward the ladies. Another fear is they're just so hairy. So those hairs, in quotations, I say hairs, they serve many purposes, including being sense organs. So that's part of what makes them so sensitive to prey on their webs or the prey around them. So actually that hair is really an amazing part of their body, not just something to make them look gross. So, and so on. People have all kinds of fears, but when you teach them, when you try to educate them, sometimes it can really help a lot. and they end up being fascinated by what they learn. And I often invite them to join me sometime to go on a spider walk, because observing spiders in their natural habitat can be so transformative. So this is what helps with that ew factor, right? When they just see the spider, they're scared of it, or they see it as an intruder, right? They see those scary eyes or something, that they have that gut reaction. But when they can take the time to sit and watch it, have some education or explanation, sometimes taking that time can help change that around. So spider walk can be fun. Okay, next question. We visit the island every year for the last many years to see the spiders. This year they had less, way less. How come? Also, why do they migrate to the island, and what attracts them exactly? Do they need the salt water? Why is it not going? So great questions. First off, why do they come? So the unique ecology of the Great Salt Lake and its food web is at work here. The spiders are taking advantage of the abundance of insects around the lake, especially brine flies. So we've got a whole complex food web with the brine shrimp, brine flies, the birds, everybody working together. But that hatch of the brine flies is incredible. The swarm of that. These spiders come in massive numbers. It's incredible. So you can actually find a lot of the western spotted orb weavers at places like Utah Lake as well. But I think it's really the way they show up in these huge numbers for that giant swarming of the brine flies, that when they have that huge hatch and then the spiders peter out after that big hatch, that makes it really, really impressive out at Antelope Island. So as for the differing numbers from year to year, it can depend on a number of things. So for one, the hatch never happens at exactly the same time. So sometimes the Spider Fest is a little early, sometimes it's a little late to see the numbers at their peak. So it can depend on weather patterns. It depends on the brine flies. So it may or not be a good year for the swarmers. If there isn't food, the spiders aren't going to hang out. And if you think about the brine flies, that could depend on, you know, the water quality, can depend on so many factors because it is such a complex system. The next question is, why are spider webs so sticky? I included pictures of several different kinds of webbing here. So first, the simple answer. So if you think about if you had fly paper, which we wouldn't use because it's an inhumane way to control pests, right? That's just not nice. But if you had fly paper that wasn't sticky, you'd never catch a fly, right? It would just bounce off it. But there are many different kinds of webs and not all are sticky. So orb weavers' webs are constructed in a way that threads going around the circle are sticky, but not the straight line threads. That's why the orb weaver spiders are able to walk around that web and not get stuck to it, because they know exactly which threads they can walk on and which ones are not for them. Funnel weavers' webs are sheet-like, where it leads to a hole where they wait. They also have trip lines that come out in kind of a tangled fashion. So none of that is sticky, but it's fashioned in a way that the prey comes along and hits those trip lines, and it sends a signal down the trip line to that spider that's waiting in the funnel hole, and it gets that signal and knows that there's something coming along, and it can run out, and those are one of the speediest little spiders, and it can run out and grab that prey as it gets, if it gets close enough to the hole. If it stays out far, it doesn't bother. They're pretty fun to watch. Okay, mesh weavers, these are tiny ones that you'll find on the edge of flowers or on sticks. They have kind of a tangly web. They have what's called cribellet web that is sort of a fluffy type of webbing. And it's not sticky, but that fluffiness to it makes it become kind of sticky because the insects get stuck in that fluffiness. Cobweb spiders use a mix of tangleweb threads that tangle the prey as it gets in there because it's all messy, and sticky threads. So they're very effective because prey really gets caught up in that. And there are many spider families that don't use webs at all. So this is why spiders are really effective hunters of all kinds, because there are so many different ways of capturing prey. Oh, and then I had one picture of this mesh weaver webbing, that cribellet webbing. So that's that, as you see the little structures where it's just a little bit fluffy. I don't know if it looks fluffy exactly, but that's what sticks the insects in there. I'm gonna actually switch over to, let's see. Before I take more questions, I'm just gonna show you real quick. I'm really excited about our project, and then we're gonna talk. So I'm hoping that you guys are contributing to the BioBlitz, the project on iNaturalist. If you're not familiar with it, or if you're not familiar with iNaturalist, please check it out, iNaturalist.org, or there's an app for Android or Apple and iPhone, and you take a picture of any kind of organism. Of course, we're talking about spiders, so you would take a picture of your spider. It's better if you can take multiple views of the spider, and helpful if you can get some of their habitat, their web if there is one, and you upload it. And right now, we are having this project to record the biodiversity in Utah of all of our spiders. And we've got 204 observations right now. It says 30 species, but that's because that only counts those that are at the species level. It's not counting those that are just at the genus level or family level. But we've gotten some really interesting ones. So for instance, Ellen, who's our host today, has this spider in her yard. She has a few of them. This is a feather-legged spider. This has been known to be in Utah for decades, at least decades, but they are almost never ever seen. So I had looked back at the documentation on this, and back many decades ago, they were collecting them in Salt Lake, in Fillmore, in St. George. But since then, no one sees them anymore. Lo and behold, Ellen finds them in her yard in the avenues, or close to the avenues by the Capitol.
Yeah.
And it's its own family. So they make an orb web, but it's this feather-legged orb weaver family. And they are the most incredible, teeny tiny little spiders. And they have these feather structures on their front legs. So this is its underside, and it's upside down. So we're looking at it from its hind at the top to its front legs are at the bottom. But it's just an incredible find. I'm so excited she's got these in her yard. I was ecstatic when she told me, and I'm really excited too that she's able to add this to our Spider Fest project.
Rebecca, while you're on this page, Wendy had a question about iNaturalist and being in touch with you specifically.
Yes.
And if there are ways to tag you in an iNaturalist submission to get you to look at it potentially a little quicker.
Absolutely.
So maybe via one of these posts, that might be a good way to.
Yes. So when you upload your observation, in the comments, you can make a note and put the @ sign and my handle, which is Tiger BB. And if you don't remember that, you can search for people, and you could search my name, and it should show you my username, Tiger BB. And if you are on the website like this, if you start typing in @TIGER, it gives you a drop-down list, and you can see that it shows you the name and username, and you can just select that. So you can put my handle and a little note. Will you please take a look at this, or can you help me identify, or whatever you want to say, and add the comment. And you can do that on the app or the website.
Awesome. And then I'm wondering, keep showing a couple cool pictures for sure. Montana also was asking where to look for spiders and any photography tips. So maybe some of these observations might be useful in answering that question too.
Definitely. So multiple points of view of the spider. So if we can see the most helpful, excuse me. The most helpful for just about any species is going to be looking down upon the top of the spider. So like this one, where we can see its back, because that's going to usually have markings we want to look at. And we will also see its overall shape, because we want to see the shape of its head, the shape of its abdomen, the length of its legs in proportion to the body. Now, there's a lot that tells us. That's the most important shot, is that overhead shot. But then if you can also get a shot of its eyes and a shot of its underside, if possible. That one is often tough to get. Easier if they're in an orb web or something like that. But that one is, you know, an if. They're all if. You get what you can get. But spinnerets, if possible. I just try to get everything I possibly can. But also closer up. If you can crop the photo so that we're getting the closest shot we can get. And then a habitat shot is helpful so that we can get some context of where it is, and notes, including notes about where you found it. If there's anything useful and anything about what was going on. Was it doing anything interesting? I wanted to show this one from Kirsten. Maybe I'll just have to choose her because I don't know if I can just see it. No, not identifiers, observers. Kirsten. There she is. Nope, that's just going to take me to her.
You could click on her observations from that page.
Oh, I could have, couldn't I?
Yeah.
It's not going to let me do that. Okay. Oh, she's been busy. Here it is. Okay, so this is a spider. This is a species that I saw on the list of Utah species that I said, my first reaction was, I think maybe they were mistaken. But of course, the list of species is coming from arachnologists going back like 200 years. So I looked back and there's a record of a specimen being taken in the 50s that's in a museum at Harvard, and it was collected just east of Payson or somewhere, Spanish Fork, something like that. So I said, okay, then this is going on my list of I've got to find this, because this is a species that is really common in the Pacific Northwest, but we do not see this species here. And lo and behold, here it shows up in our project. And Kirsten was so good to give us multiple views so that I could definitely ID it. So she's got the side and the underneath, and she had the back. And here I've got a web view. So I was able to see it really clearly and say, oh, this is for sure. This is this dome web that makes it really clear. This is definitely the right species. So again, I was ecstatic. Really, really cool find. And then one more. This one is just not one. Oh, I went and clicked on the species. One observation. This is just not one we usually see because I think it's only out in the desert in Utah. So it's a little cobweb weaver, but it's just really uncommon. It's just an Asagana, but it's just neat. So I like seeing species that we don't often see here, but they're all neat. They're all my favorites.
Well, and what I love about this sort of thing is that people just, you're out and you see a spider, you snap a picture, and if you're like me, you don't necessarily always know what it is you're seeing. And to somebody who does know about spiders, the fact that could be really exciting is so fun. And so I sort of live for that with iNaturalist. And so when Rebecca gets excited because I find something cool in my yard, I'm like, yes! And it's a cool thing. And that's it's one of many reasons why I love using iNaturalist. So there was another question in the chat window from Wendy when you were talking about orb weavers on Antelope Island, and she was wondering if, regarding the numbers of spiders, could it also have to do with potentially people pressure, looking at spiders on the island, walking through webs, displacing them year after year?
It's a good question, and I think she would know better than I would how much traffic there is and whether that's enough to make an impact. And I don't know if they are laying their eggs there and staying there, or if they balloon in from someplace else. My guess is that it's not enough to affect the numbers, because I think that they would come in for it, but I could absolutely be wrong.
So I'll open it up to everybody, and Rebecca, you too, of course. Obviously, you've got the floor the whole time, but if there are other questions that people have or stories they want to share, you're welcome to type it in the chat. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask it with your voice, whatever works.
Oh, and I also have, I brought my pile of recommended books that I love. So most of them are not really field guides so much. Only one really is called a field guide. And this one is field guide. And I have a list of these that I'm going to share with Ellen so she can send them to anyone who's interested. She'll just send it to everybody, I think, on the list so that you can have it if you want it. But this is the Field Guide to the Spiders of California and the Pacific Coast States by R.J. Adams. So technically it includes a lot of spiders that we don't have because it is the West Coast, but we have a lot of spiders in common, and it's really a good guide, has a lot of good information. So I do like this one, and it is more field guide size, and R.J. Adams is such a good guy. So I like that one. My all-time favorite spider book is this one, Common Spiders of North America by Richard Bradley. It's pretty spendy, but beautiful and such good information in this one. Definitely not field guide size. This one, for any bug pursuits or spiders, tracks and sign of insects and other invertebrates. So this one is helpful. It's got information about webs and webbing that may or may not be spiders. So it's helpful in kind of determining, like, is this spider? Is this not spider? And then any kind of signs, because when you're searching and looking and you see, I mean, there's so much sign out there, and like, what is this? What is this from? There's awesome information in this. And it's just such a good guide and really just fascinating reading. Love this book. That's by Charlie Eisenman and Noah Charney. And all of these people are on iNaturalist. You can totally connect with them and work with them on identifying things. And that's a really cool part of iNaturalist too. And this book just came out, Spiders of the World. And this one is, you know, encompasses obviously world spiders, but it covers all of the families. So it's showing you where you can find spiders from these families. So it includes information that's relevant absolutely to North America as well. And it is absolutely gorgeous and has the most fascinating information. And it's edited by Norm Platnick, who just recently passed away. And I highly recommend this one. And then for those who are really serious about spider information and identification, Spiders of North America, an Identification Guide, Volume 2. That one is indispensable.
Awesome.
So I saw some questions coming in.
Yes, there's some things rolling in the chat. BJ was wondering if there were trapdoor spiders in the area, and Christy responded saying that they are here, though rarely seen.
And just one species. That's I don't know how to say it, Antrodetius montanus. And I have not seen it because they're very reclusive, and I would love to see one. I know we have them out by Saratoga Springs and Tooele, and yeah, we only have one. California has all kinds. It's just rude.
Well, you know they're there. You can always go visit when safe to do so. Denise said that her 5-year-old granddaughter wants to know the shapes of a spider.
The shapes. Oh, so they are so many shapes. And that is one of the reasons to check out that book by Norm Platnick. Get it from the library, because they are even odder shapes than you can even imagine. There are spiders that have eyes on little stalks on top of their heads, and just the craziest shapes. There are spiders that are round and spiders that are really long. One of my favorite spiders that we have here is called the long-jawed Orb Weaver, and it's really long and skinny, and it has jaws that are really long and then come out, and close up, it looks kind of scary. The first time I saw pictures, I thought, oh, we don't have that here. That's a huge, frightening spider. And then I found out it was just kind of tiny, and from far away, it doesn't really look like a big, scary thing. And they make beautiful orb webs that are sort of sideways or diagonal over the water a lot of the time. And they take advantage of the insects that fly over the water, and they're just lovely, lovely spiders. And yes, we have spiders of all different sizes and shapes. And some that actually a lot of different spiders that act like they're ants. They look like ants in different ways, and they just sort of live amongst the ants, so the ants don't notice them there, and then they eat the ants. So lots of spiders that mimic other things. And then there are other things that mimic the spiders. They like to act like each other. They're tricky.
I saw a long-jawed orb weaver along the Jordan River earlier this week, over by the Fife wetland. If anyone is interested in going to peek, they're there. And they're really, the only time I could find them is when they're like frantically making their orbed webs over the water. Once I learned where to look for them sort of on the edges, then the ones I've been seeing are along bridges. And and they'll catch my eye because they're just like they're going back and forth and making their web. So that's when I was able to spot them. But it's always been sort of at twilight, so the photography's been harder to catch, and they're a little lower towards the water. And I'm sure some people thought I was being pretty crazy hanging out over a bridge trying to take a picture of this spider, and thankfully did not drop my phone in the Jordan River. Montana's wondering if any other bugs make webs besides spiders.
Yes, there are, especially caterpillars and larvae. So the tent web caterpillar, up in trees, a lot of times, if you go into the mountains, you'll see sometimes up in trees, there will be branches just covered with big webs, and sometimes they get filled with lots of black stuff and lots of things in there, and you think, what is that? And it turns out it's caterpillars and a whole bunch of frass, which is caterpillar poop. But they can make gigantic webs all together. And then there's also like little larvae that look like little caterpillars of different types of like sawflies, which are a type of wasp, and other kinds of creatures that will web on leaves. And I'm not sure. Christy, can you think of anything else that webs? Oh, there's like caddisfly larvae. Underwater, there are the larvae of caddisflies. They make really neat nets and things.
Yeah, I mean, there's tent caterpillars, like you mentioned. Yeah.
What about it?
Aren't there other larvae that silk leaves together to sew themselves into a cocoon that kind of pull the edges of the, I think there are different kinds of caterpillars. They're probably still leps.
Tortoisid moths and yeah, that book, with the insect sign, that has a lot of examples.
Silk moths is something BJ just said in the chat. Rebecca, I'm wondering if there are questions that you get from people frequently when they learn that you like spiders. Do they tend to say the same sorts of things to you? And I guess I'm thinking of people who are just sort of like not spider enthusiasts.
The most frequent questions I get are, what are the most dangerous spiders in Utah? So the only medically significant spider in Utah is the black widow. And I have to remind people, because they say, well, what about the brown recluse? But we don't have brown recluse in Utah. They don't range here. We do have a cousin of theirs. We have the desert recluse, which is only found really in like the far reaches of southern Utah, I believe. And they say it's possible that it could have some of the same venomous effects, but it hasn't been found to yet. And it's so out in the desert that it just doesn't pose any threat to people. And then there's also an introduced species that sometimes is found, the Mediterranean recluse, and it has been found in Salt Lake, but it also doesn't pose any threat. So, and then we have lots and lots of hobos. they're everywhere, and we live just fine with them because they are not medically significant. So, yep, the only medically significant one is black widow. And they also are very, very abundant, and we don't hear a lot about problems with them. Not to say that people don't get bit, but they just don't cause a lot of problems. So that's the biggest one, I think.
Great. You had touched on this a little bit earlier, but could you speak a little bit about maybe places to find spiders if you're maybe wanting to go on a walk outside, for example, to take pictures? But where do you start?
So many places. So the more obvious places are funnel weavers are some of the more prevalent and visible ones. So we have them, you know, in corners of buildings, on windows and around, but they're also in most of the bushes and in grass around on fences, and we have lots and lots of those. But then on flowers, we'll find a lot of spiders on flowers and plants and bushes. I like to turn leaves and look under flowers, and I find that they're really good at hiding, and sometimes they're just smaller than we expect. So I like to look and then look a little closer and then look a little closer, and maybe just spend some time waiting for something to move. So they might just be there and we don't realize it because they're really good at blending in. I also like to turn over a rock and see if there might be a ground spider underneath it, or a woodlouse spider. Sometimes if I'm going hiking, I just watch the path as I hike, because that's where I'm going to find some of the ground spiders or wolf spiders. They're just going to run across the trail as I go. Oh, one of my favorite spiders is Pardosa, is the little teeny tiny wolf spiders that love to hang out at the water's edge. They can run on water. Not all wolf spiders can do this, but they have spiky little legs, and they are able to sit on the surface tension, and they're so fast, and they can hunt on top of the water. And so if you go just about anywhere around the city, in the foothills, up in the mountains, you will find we have dozens and dozens of species of Pardosa in Utah. And they also like rocks. So in rocky areas or in any water, stream, ponds, lakes, they're all over the place. Pardosa, teeny tiny. Sometimes you'll mistake them for flies because they just sort of swarm around and they move like they're flying. But if you look closely, they're just tiny wolf spiders. They're some of my favorites.
So fun.
That's just a sampling. I mean, that's why we have to go on spider walks, because there's just so many places to look.
Any other questions or thoughts from people? Rebecca, I had one other question, but we're closing in on our time together here, and I want to be respectful of people's time, and yours especially. But you had mentioned ballooning earlier when you were talking about spider movement, and I was hoping you could give maybe a quick description of what that is, because that was something that really blew my mind when I learned about it.
So ballooning is when spiders travel with a line of silk along the breeze. So this is often how baby spiders travel to another location. People often will be frightened by spider egg sacs because they think that they're suddenly going to be overwhelmed with hundreds of new spiders, and that somehow how will they possibly live with all of these spiders in their house. But really, spiders are having egg sacs all the time, and the spider population stays controlled. So part of that is that they just don't all survive. Part of it is that oftentimes those babies balloon off someplace else. If you're familiar with Charlotte's Web, that was the babies ballooned off in that, didn't they? I believe so. I often will find little crab spiders or other little babies because they balloon by. I'll be doing something and some little baby comes along in the air and I just snatch it and oh, hello, and I take it and snatch a few pictures and then let it go along its way. But there's been research that they're not just floating along in the air, that it's also something to do with static electricity, that they use static electricity to fly along as well. But it's how they disperse, and it is the cutest thing too. So I was with Ellen the other day at Fife Wetland, and I was trying to find a dictynid, a mesh weaver for her, and suddenly she had a little baby spider land on her, and it was trying to balloon, but it just kept sticking to her. It didn't want to leave. But as we were taking pictures of it, it kept pointing its little rear end up in the air. And they do this, they get up on their legs and point their little rear up and wait for the right wind. They wait for the right conditions to then let that stream of silk go. Because once it hits the right conditions, that silk goes and they just, whoosh, it just takes them. And it is incredible. When you see threads of silk flying in the air, you see that sun hit it. That's often because there have been spiders ballooning, and it is just a beautiful thing and adorable.
It was pretty funny. That poor spider was like, I'd like to leave. Like, come on, wind.
When I realized later that was actually a baby of the exact type of spider I was looking for. For Ellen.
They really are so tiny. I think if I wasn't with someone who has a trained spider eye, I honestly never would have even seen it or thought it was a seed or a fly or, something on the way. So there really are spiders around more often than I realize. BJ said that he saw a big ballooning event near Zion with thousands of ballooning spiders in the sky, which I bet is quite a sight. And then Wendy just said, if we need any mesh weavers, they have oodles out there on the island. So something to keep in mind. Christy, I think. Awesome. Kind of fun. Well, I'd love to, Rebecca, I really want to thank you for all of your knowledge and your passion and your enthusiasm. And like I also am like, spiders, and sometimes I'm like, whoa, but I've learned so much from you and appreciate them as a species so much more. And it really, knowledge is power, and the more you know about things and where to find them and where they are, and that they're not crawling after us, there really are these amazing parts of our ecosystem and make life a wonderful thing for us on a daily basis. So that, anyway, thanks so much for passing that on and carrying that torch. And it spreads to all of us too. So I'm so grateful to everyone who's joined in the call today and people who are watching this after the fact. Thank you for your passion about spiders and helping spread the word to other people and really being an advocate for these little creatures that we have around us all the time. Please know the conversation will keep on going. Rebecca will continue to be excited about spiders, and so will I, and the Natural History Museum of Utah will keep supporting that, especially through our citizen science programming. It's an excellent way for anyone, members of the community, no matter where you are, to get involved in the natural world. Join us. It's really fun. We connect with each other virtually more so these days, but as Rebecca has mentioned a few times, it's possible to get out and do stuff in person. I'm putting my email here in the chat box. Feel free to be in touch with me if you have interest in doing some sort of a spider walk or getting together as a group. Email me and we can figure out some safe ways to do that. We'll wear our masks and get outside and go find some fun places to look for spiders with Rebecca. So So please do consider being in touch with me as an open invitation to anyone out there. And then, as Rebecca also mentioned, iNaturalist is an excellent platform to connect with all different kinds of experts in anything in the natural world. Spiders especially are applicable to our conversation today. It's a great place to stay up to date with fun pictures Rebecca's tagging, or inquire and ask other questions of her and other spider experts. They're all easily accessible on iNaturalist, and often pretty excited to talk and answer questions. And so think of that as a fun way to be in touch with people as well. So thanks to all of you for your passions, and thanks also to Antelope Island and Wendy Wilson and the 2020 Spider Fest. This is the final day of the virtual Spider Fest for 2020. So we've still got our BioBlitz going. You can still contribute any spider pictures you've taken this week or through the end of the day today will count towards our BioBlitz, which is on iNaturalist. And then check out Antelope Island and their website for more information on fun things you can continue to connect with regarding Spider Fest. So with that, cheers to all of you. Happy Spider Fest 2020, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.